What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, I'm going to be going through my takeaways of Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes' press conference for the Detroit Lions today. So let's get it started.
I got to shout out DoseOfDion, man, because it was actually the first time I went live on YouTube. And, guys don't know, DoseOfDion, he put out a lot of good content for the Detroit Lions.
Welcome, everybody, to another video. Glad you guys are here. Woo! And we got a presser today, baby. I'm hyped. Hey, I usually don't know when the pressers are going to happen. I don't know how to find out. Maybe it's on Detroit Lions Twitter or something. I got to be more locked in to Detroit Lions Twitter. But I did watch the press conference. I took some notes, and I got some takeaways. Now, before we get this thing started, I want to give a thank you to Dan Campbell. Why am I saying thank you to Dan Campbell? Well, even though, they can't say everything because they can't say everything, he does try to be as honest as possible, I will say. So at least gives you something, okay? Because sometimes you watch these entire press conferences and you really don't gain anything from it because they can't say anything. I feel like Dan Campbell tries to be as honest as possible, which is really refreshing. And I do appreciate it because it gives us something to at least talk about. Even though they still didn't give away anything, he does try to go into as much detail as possible. So I would like to say that. And he's always bringing the energy, which honestly gets me excited, okay? He brought the energy this morning. He was drinking the coffee. I don't drink coffee, but I drank some protein. Sorry. Took some notes on both of them. They started with Dan Campbell first, so let's just dive right into it. Here are my takeaways. Okay, the first thing, and this is something that was kind of the headlines today, as they asked, okay, who's going to be the final decision maker? Now, this was actually asked as the first question, but the guy cut out, so it came back to it later. But basically, he said this, all right? Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes are going to be the two guys to make the final roster decisions, okay? But Dan Campbell always brings up his listening skills, saying that he wants to hear everybody. He wants it to be all about debates, okay? He wants to hear the other side of it. He doesn't want yes men. If you and Brad Holmes disagree, Dan Campbell said, we've already had disagreements. But, and this is where the headlines come from, he said this: a true alpha knows when it's time to concede for the betterment of the team. That sounds like a poem or something. Are you kidding me, Dan Campbell?
Weeks ago. But here's what I'd say about a true alpha. A true alpha knows when it's time to concede for the betterment of the team.
I don't think I've ever heard a coach say that at a presser. That was awesome. Ego thing for the entire team of, where our priorities should be set. All right. We have to put our egos aside and look at it as, okay, what's the best for the team and what do most people want to go with? What does the majority feel? If I'm the odd man out, I'm not going to force my issue or force my opinion because that's not for the best of the team. Our guys will ride along with whatever we feel is the best. So he's willing to, at least what he's saying, he's willing to step back and say, hey, we're going to do what's best for the team, even if that means not going with exactly initially what I wanted. It's pretty summed up in that one sentence what Sheila Ford Hamp was looking for this offseason. And it's not a slight at anybody in the past, but she was looking for someone that, it wasn't my way and this is how we're going to do it. It was, okay, again, I don't know what the past regime looked like. I'm not even touching on that. I'm just simply focused on this one. She wanted a guy like Dan Campbell that had the characteristics, that had the qualities of, hey, I'm a great listener, and, I'm willing to do what's best for the team, not put myself first. There's no ego there. There's not, hey, this isn't the way I wanted it, so I'm upset. No, it's like, hey, if that's what you guys feel is the best, we'll see what everybody does feel the best is. We'll get everybody's opinion there. I'll listen. I'll think about it. I'll stew on it. And I'll try to see your point of view. But I believe that's my biggest strength. If I'm the odd man out, I'm okay with that. But it's for the better of the team. So we'll see how that process goes as time goes on. There will be disagreements between the two. But so far, they said it's went well. So that's good. Hopefully that continues. Then they were asked about some of their needs, really heading into the free agency and the draft. And they brought up, a lot of the positional groups. But the first positional groups that came to Dan Campbell's mind were, first off, receiver. He said it's no question that, receiver is going to be a need for the Detroit Lions. Okay, we need depth there. Then he also brought up the cornerback position, saying they needed depth at cornerback. We know that we have Amani and we have Okuda, but technically we still have Justin Coleman and Desmond Trufant, but we'll get to that in a second. But they do need depth there. He also brought up linebacker and interior defensive line and then offensive line depth. All right, so that's what he went into. Now, last time we got to hear from some of our coaches, Anthony Lynn told us that he said that offensive line was the deepest, position on the team. The initial positions that he brought up in terms of needs, so it makes you think, okay, that's kind of what he's looking at as his top needs, but they do talk about a little bit more later. But he did say this: he doesn't want Brad Holmes to have to chase positions in the draft, meaning that I have to draft a guy simply because we need to fill that position out. He instead wants it to be, basically, he didn't say it, but it's kind of like, hey, the best player available, whoever we like the most, that we can take this guy. We're not chasing positions, which it's going to be difficult to do that on free agency with the money that we have, but he followed it up by saying this. If in free agency we have to go sign guys that aren't quite as talented, but will compete and will push guys, even if that's a 1-year deal, Campbell made it kind of obvious there and kind of clear there that, okay, expect some possible cheap signings, vet signings, guys to help fill out the roster, guys that will compete for spots. That way, when it comes to draft time, they're not completely drafting for positions. They're drafting based on who they actually want. Because if you draft for positions and you're kind of this far away right now where it seems like the Lions are and they're kind of retooling the roster, that can be an issue. At this point, you kind of want to take who you think are the best players. That way you can hit on more picks. If you're only a few pieces away, drafting the players that you need makes sense. In this case, you don't really want to have to do that. So it does make a lot of sense if you think about it, because the Lions have pushed not the Lions, but we've been told all offseason that the Lions are trying to build through the draft, not through free agency. You can't buy a locker room in free agency, is what Chris Spielman said, which makes sense, and this is the approach. Now, unfortunately, because of where the Lions are at financially, they're probably going to have to do some things like in the draft, drafting players because they need that position. I mean, you still draft needs, but you don't want to have to be forced into a certain pick because you have a hole at a certain spot. So you kind of cleared it up as, hey, look, we're going to try to fill out the roster with certain players, that can compete. Maybe not the most expensive free agents, maybe not the most talented free agent, but that allows us to take who, maybe at the spot wherever we are in the draft, to take who we think is the best available at a position of need, but not forced into a certain position because we have holes there. We're going to have holes heading into the draft, I assume, because of where we're at financially, but the Lions are going to try their best to not make that the case for every single pick, where it's basically going down the line of needs. Well, we really like this guy, but we can't take him because we need a receiver, so we got to go with receiver instead. And if you think about it, if you're trying to build through the draft, and look, the Lions, they're looking at this, where are we 2 years from now, not next season, because they're right there where they are financially and where they are right now as a team. It's going to take some time. And chasing picks for positions doesn't really make a lot of sense because it's not going to be the guy that you love the most. If you were a year away, if you were a team that felt like, okay, we need a couple spots and we can go make a big push this season, at a certain point, you do chase positions in the draft a little bit, but we're not at that stage right now. So for this stage, it's getting the best players that we think are available that will fill needs, but not necessarily forcing it to fill a need because we have that need there. You know what I'm saying? So don't expect the Lions to be making any huge splashes in free agency consistently, I would say, this offseason. I'll just leave it there, and it'll open up the Lions draft options, because that is their goal for Brad Holmes, is let him be the scouting wizard that he is and draft some of the best players that he possibly can, and hopefully that jumpstarts the building through the draft phase, which is going to take time, but you got to get some really good players that you really like. You don't want to be forced taking a guy that you didn't really love. That's always the thing, man. Just because it's a need now doesn't mean it will be a need a year from now. So if you're looking at where we're 2 years from now, you don't focus as much on what do we absolutely need this season. You can focus on, okay, here's who I feel like could be a really good fit for this team. I really like this guy. Even though maybe he's not our biggest need right now, I really do like him. So I like to take him because I feel like for the next 4 years, he could be a really big part of our team. Then you do that instead, because, next year when you go through free agency, you go through the draft again. Now that position that back then was a need, maybe isn't a need anymore, because he had all this time to work on filling out that position. And he could be saying, well, we didn't really need that need. So we drafted him, but we missed out on who we really loved. We'll see how many positions they can fill out in free agency, but I know it's going to be difficult. But here's where I like the honesty. Here's where I love the honesty of Dan Campbell. They asked him about ties. If a guy has ties, does that make it, does that mean you're more likely to probably sign that guy? And he said, I'm going to be honest, having ties does help. All right. Now, it won't be all from one team, but if anyone has history with a player, it is intriguing. So he said it's not just if they're a Saint, but if they had, ties with Mark DeLone, who was the linebacker coach, if they have ties with our defensive line coach, with Deuce Staley, if they have ties with someone in the front office, so Ray Agnew, someone that they know, that we trust, that they know about. He said the real reason that ties are helpful is because we know their downside. All right. We know that part of their game. All right. That's the part that we usually don't know when we sign players. We know that. We know the player. Right. So if someone has ties, then yeah, it is intriguing. And I think that's expected. We've seen that with our past regime, and we've seen that with a lot of regimes. Usually when a new head coach, new GM come in, usually where they from, you see guys that are brought in from that place because they know that person. So he did say, yeah, there could be some guys with ties, and there's probably going to be guys with ties that are brought into this roster. Doesn't mean it'll all be from one team, but yeah, ties are definitely intriguing. So expect some guys to be signed this offseason with ties. I'm already kind of expecting that because that's what it just seems like that always happens. He did touch on the tight end position a little bit. They kind of went, I don't know if they really went into Kyle Pitts very much, but he did say he doesn't look at it like a tight end because it's so much different. Today he looks at it like a big skill, as in the guy's big, but he's very skilled.
The position has definitely changed throughout the years. When I played, I remember when I first came in, it was the workout. I mean, about an hour in, you might get to some ball drills. It was, you know, you line up your stance and you're hitting bags and you're hitting sleds and they're running you through, and then you're going to find out if you're going to quit or not. And I mean, it's totally different. Now you're looking at the athlete.
He said the tight end position is very tough for defenses to match up with, and they can now use him in many different ways. Today's game is more of a threat, more of a receiving threat than what they were back when he was a tight end, when it was all about blocking. And then at the end of practice, you would get to, you know, catch some passes. Now it's more about being a threat. And the Lions kind of have that with, you know, Hunter Bryant as a backup. We'll see what they do behind that. Is it going to be Mack? Is it going to be Thedford? Right? Is it going to be one of those two guys? I mean, we haven't seen much of Thedford. Mack, we've seen a little bit at Notre Dame. And then obviously you have TJ Hockenson, who's just an absolute baller. So I just want to touch on that a little bit. Really didn't say a lot about it, but he did bring up what they did with Jared Cook, how they used him in the slot, they used him on the outside. But if they need him to block, they can. Justin Coleman and Desmond Trufant was, of course, brought up here. And this is what Dan Campbell said.
Brad and I have talked about all that, and I would say there's going to be some things that go down this week one way or another.
Justin Coleman and Desmond Trufant, some things will go down this week. But he did say we do need depth and competition at that cornerback position. He said, but some things will go down this week. Didn't tell us what it is, but some things will go down this week. What does that tell me? Probably getting cut. I'm just going to be honest. I don't know. I think Desmond Trufant's going to be cut. I don't know. Maybe they announced, well, they're staying on the roster. I'm not sure. But if it goes down this week, you would think that would mean they're getting cut, or, you know, because if it's going down this week, they don't really have to announce anything if they're not going to cut him because they're still on the roster. So I'm thinking that there may be some cuts coming soon. I'm not saying there will, but I'm just saying just look out. Definitely Desmond Trufant, I'm anticipating will get cut. He does know Desmond Trufant because he played within their division a while with Atlanta when he was with New Orleans. But he said things will go down this week. So we'll see what those are. Now, he did bring up Deuce Staley, the running back coach from Philadelphia. And I thought it was kind of funny. I was watching some of those old Madden games. I saw Deuce Staley as a running back. I was like, oh, snap, that's our running back coach. I always forget that these guys are all former players. Every time I see their name, I'm like, what? Antoine Randall L, you know, all that. It's just kind of wild in all the old Madden games. So I got to get some cool jerseys. Maybe I got like a Deuce Staley jersey or something. I wanted to find a Dan Campbell one, but I couldn't find one, so I'd have to customize it. But then it's not as cool. I wanted the old one, you know? Actually, it's not as cool then. I don't know if anybody had a Dan Campbell jersey with the Lions because he was here for a very short period of time. And, you know, he probably wasn't, I wouldn't say he's not a household name, but, you know, he wasn't like, you know what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying. But still, I kind of want a cool jersey of like one of these coaches. But with Deuce Staley, he said this. Deuce Staley's going to be treated kind of like he was with New Orleans. He said when he called Deuce Staley, look, you're not going to be just the assistant coach. You're not just the running back coach. You are going to be, here's how I interpret it, taken under his wing as a guy that's going to be prepared to be a head coach for the future. So he's kind of doing Deuce Staley like Sean Payton, Dan Campbell, you know, kind of taking him under his wing, letting him do some media outlets, letting him do some pressers, being involved in everything. He said he's been both involved in offense and defense, even though he has to focus more on offense because that's where he's working with Anthony Lynn. He is going to be involved in everything. That way, when he is done, he's going to be prepared to be a head coach somewhere. So I guess Deuce Staley is kind of like our assistant head coach in a way, you know. So maybe, just maybe, I'm just saying, maybe he pulls a Schmidt, if you guys can remember, we talked about some of the Lions' older coaches, who was a player. Now, unfortunately, he wasn't a former player for us. Like, he didn't play for us. But he was an assistant, and then he became our head coach. So, after Dan Campbell is done, hopefully, like, 20 years from now, when we win, like, 7 Super Bowl rings, and he's like, you know what? I'm kind of just bored. It's too easy. You know, the Packers are trash. And he's like, Deuce, you do your thing. I'm going to go back here and chill. I'll go work in the front office. I'll go drink my coffee or whey protein or whatever I got to do. And you run the show. And then Deuce is going to step in and be like, come on, man. Like, give me a challenge, you know? And we're going 17-0 or 18-0. I bought this at a store. It's like I don't know. It said squish it, but I thought it was leaking, but it's not anymore. I think it healed itself. It's kind of like, this thing is so cool though. I mean, seriously, like, come on, man. That's hand eye. So that's kind of cool. You know, I think Deuce Staley probably definitely appreciates that. It's really good for him as well. I wasn't anticipating that to be a thing. So I thought when I heard that, I was like, oh, that's some news right there. So I thought I'd touch on it. Then he talked about the roster that's already here. He said there's a good group of guys here. Usually that's not the case. Some guys you have to move out, things like that. We've seen that in the past. But this time he said that's not the case. There are a lot of good guys here. And I could see how he would say that. When you think about a roster, we have a lot of guys that off the field do a lot of great things. You don't really hear about bad things off the field. So, that is one really good positive about what the roster does look like as of now. For Sheila Ford wanting to go into, the reports were out there that Sheila Ford was involved in the meetings. She was involved in building the roster, free agency meetings, all this stuff. And he wanted to touch on that. And he said basically, Sheila has been great. She has been on Zoom calls, listening to the decisions, but he loves how involved she is as an owner. I'm going to be personally honest. I love it too. I do. I have no problem with her being involved. I mean, and he's saying, look, she's going to be involved. And we do listen to her input because she's the owner. Personally, I look at it like this. She shouldn't be, the final say. You hired these guys for a reason, right? To do their job, to build a team. So you listen to them. But for Sheila Ford, I want her to be involved. I'd want Sheila Ford involved. You know why? Because at least from a fan perspective, I like hearing that our owner really, really wants to win football games. That tells me she wants to win games. We touched on this in a past video. Tells me she wants to win games if she's involved in meetings, she's involved, listening to the roster, even if she's not, making the decisions, just to be in the know of what's really going on. Because that tells me she wants to win football games. She's not just like, oh yeah, you guys go do your thing and I'll just sit back here, you guys try to figure it out, and then randomly I'm going to decide to fire you if it doesn't go well. I want to be in the know of what's actually going on. This is my first opportunity being the owner with my guys that I was part of bringing in, so let me be involved in it, let me just hear at least what's going on. And they love it, they think it's been great, she's been able to give them anything that they need, she's been able to give them the tools that they need, but I think it's awesome. I actually really do like it. I mean, I don't want her making, hey, here's the final decision, here's what we're doing, guys, but I do like the fact that she's involved and she does care. It tells you how much she wants to win games, so I love that about that. Then on to Brad Holmes. Brad Holmes had a little bit less to say, I would say. First off, he was asked what positions he thinks were the deepest in the draft. He brought up the safety position, very interesting, and also the quarterback position. So he said the safety class is deep. Throughout all the levels of the draft, it's deep. I thought that was an interesting comment. First off, we know safety's a need. All right, we're going to need probably a ball hawking safety, something like that in the back end. So it makes sense that safety would be something on their radar. And Brad Holmes is the draft guy, so he should know about tons of prospects out there, okay? He's our own little draft guy. But safety position is a very interesting one. Kind of weird that he brought that one up. But, maybe because it wasn't super expected. Receiver, you always think, okay, that one's deep. But safety, as much as they don't really have maybe a first round guy going into, I don't know if they'll have a safety in the first round this season. It does seem like, though, second round, third round, there's a pretty good amount of guys that have a lot of really high ceiling traits with maybe some development that's needed. And then you kind of go throughout the draft, and there's some solid depth there. I don't think there's any top guys, at safety. At least that's what's getting projected right now, that no one's probably going to be a top guy, top safety in this draft. But the Lions aren't going to be looking at a safety at number 7. Or heck, even if they trade back, they're not going to be probably looking at a safety in the first round. However, when you're talking mid-rounds to day 3, that's probably why he brought it up, because that's where the Lions could use a safety to potentially look to be that back-end ball hawk. And it is kind of deep. I mean, there's a lot of really strong names, I would say, at the safety position. I mean, you could look at Holland, you could look at Hamza, and those are some of the top guys, Andre Sisco, Richie Grant, and then you could go back a little bit. You have Caden Stearns, Reed Blankenship. I've done a video with Paris Ford involved. We've done one with Richard LeCount. There's Joe Webb. He's also a safety / corner out of Georgia. There's some versatile guys. Look, it's a pretty deep class. It's pretty strong, I would say, in terms of guys that can develop, be part of a future, but also have those high-end, kind of traits that you're looking to build off of. That's what I see. I don't know if there's a super complete safety that should be a first-round pick this year, but I do see a lot of nice traits there. So if you're looking for a ball hawk, there's guys with a lot of big plays in back end. If you're looking for a guy that can play nickel, can line up at slot. If you're looking for a guy that can play in the box, that has a lot of size. If you're looking for someone that can be a big hitter, there's all these different types of players. But the Lions won't be looking in the first round for a safety anyway, so I think that's why he says this. It's kind of deep. So I would say day 2 to day 3, there are a lot of positions there. Not early, maybe not the top talent, but there is kind of deep. That means that Lions could be looking to draft a safety or potentially even sign one as a UDFA instead of necessarily signing one as a free agent, getting more of a younger player back there to potentially help mold with some of the other guys like Will Harris, Tracy Walker, Okuda, and Amani at the same time. That could be the case. I mean, we'd be looking at a drafted safety now. Maybe that's a little bit of an inside scoop. And also the quarterback position. He said, I like the quarterbacks. But he said, when you're inside the top 10, you have to know all the positions. Now, the Lions, unfortunately, have been in the top 10 for the last now 3 seasons, including this one. So, unfortunately, we know all too well what it means to be in the top 10, which is not a good thing, but that's been the case. At least we get an early draft pick. Woo! No, it's tough. Okay, yeah, we've been in the top 10. We've been in the top 10 too much, all right? We really have been, and hopefully we can get out of that soon. But it is important to know all positions, because when you're in the top 10, I mean, you're looking at who should be the best of the best by position. So it's really just, if you're not having to you don't want to have to chase a position, I would say, in the first round unless you need a quarterback. So you should be able to take, who you think is the best out there. And that's why you have to be well-known, well-versed with out there. And he said he likes the quarterbacks. What he likes about the quarterbacks is that there's different flavors. And if you think about it, let's just go with the top quarterbacks, right? You have Zach Wilson, this guy that's kind of a unique off-schedule player, makes a lot of plays outside of the pocket, kind of a fun, dynamic player to watch. There's a lot of arm talent. Then you look at a Mac Jones, who's kind of the opposite, right? More of a pocket passer, not the biggest arm, maybe not the most electric outside of the pocket, but a competitor. He's very accurate when he needs to be. He's done a really lot of good things with Alabama. And then you look at Trey Lance, who's different from both. He's kind of built like Dan Campbell, like a big tight end that runs the ball really, really well, big arm, has some accuracy issues. But you can tell there is a vast difference in quarterbacks. And I would say, early in the draft, that is definitely true. And then so that can make you interested. And then when you look later in the draft, I've noticed there's a lot of mobile quarterbacks. There's a pretty good amount of mobile quarterbacks in this draft. But even later in the draft, there is a pretty nice mix. I mean, you have your Davis Mills, and then you have your Kellen Mond, right? A little bit different type of player there. You have your Jamie Newman, Kyle Trask, right? Those are some interesting names as well. But then you get towards the tail end of their draft, where you're talking round 6, round 7, round maybe 5, day 3 picks, where you're potentially looking at, okay, what Lions used to do in the past, if they have enough picks, we draft a quarterback just to have them compete. And then you're looking at Sam Ehlinger, Felipe Franks, Ian Book. I don't know who's all going to be available there, right? That's kind of what you're looking at then at the end of the draft. So, I mean, that's kind of how I view it as, yeah, I see what he's saying. There are different flavors, especially early in the draft. There's different flavors. Doesn't mean the Lions will take a quarterback. They did touch on Jared Goff a little bit, saying that, Jared Goff does help them make their decisions, even though he's not technically on the roster yet. It does help them, kind of mold how they want to do things in the offseason, because they can kind of build the team around having familiarity with Jared Goff of what he knows and what he plays best with. So that's, again, a guy with ties that can be beneficial, because since Jared Goff has been with the Rams, Brad Holmes knows when he was at his best, what pieces that took to put around him. So, yeah, I mean, look, I anticipate Jared Goff's going to be the starter next season. Doesn't mean they won't draft a quarterback. I don't think they'll do that at 7. I just don't feel it. But if they do have enough picks and, they're able to do it, I think at some point in the draft you could see a quarterback definitely taken if there's someone that he likes. I mean, I don't think you ever should reach for that position, but if there's someone that he likes, you take one. It's very possible the Lions do cut Chase Daniel this offseason, which would mean you would have that quarterback as well. I mean, you could roll with 2, but you kind of want to have 3, but that could be UDFA. You don't have to draft somebody. I mean, we've seen, quarterbacks are going to fall out. Some quarterbacks fall out because there's just that many quarterbacks. So if there is someone that you like that could fall the draft, maybe you sign him as UDFA and you put him on there and let him compete for the backup role. I mean, that could definitely happen, and maybe you find a steal. Maybe you found a gem and you didn't even know it. And I think I do have to bring myself back to the Dan Campbell point when he did bring up a running back to complement Swift, which made me very happy. I forgot to mention it, but yes, he brought up bringing in a running back to complement Swift, and I was like, thank you so much, Dan Campbell. And then he brought up that the defense needs help. He said, we're going to start on the defensive side of the ball, where we need depth and possibly starters. But he did say that there are players that were drafted. He specifically brought up last year's draft class, but I think there's other ones that you can bring up too, with guys like Jelani and, Jared Davis, maybe if he's brought back, things like that. But he brought up specifically last year's draft class, saying that, hey, there's guys here, that there's some potential that I know well from the draft process that can compete for spots. Those guys defensively would be Julian Okwara, who was a 3rd-round pick, Jeff Okudah, of course, who was our first pick, Jay Sean Cornell, the defensive end, who didn't play last season because of an injury, so we don't even know what he can do, and John Pennicini, who was our nose tackle last year. So yeah, I mean, there are some solid pieces there. I think Julian Okwara, I'm really the most excited about Okwara, because I want to see, I think this guy could take off. I think he could take off as a pass rusher. That's what I'm excited about. Cornell, he's just, you don't know, and I think he has some really nice pass rushing upside as a defensive end / maybe defensive tackle with the versatility out of Ohio State. Pennicini, we saw, how well he could play last season. Okudah, of course, everybody's excited about Okudah, and hopefully that he can bounce back coming off of an injury. But this is also what Brad Holmes brought up was the receiver room, knowing that that's a need. He said one thing that I was with Rams is how quickly we were able to flip that receiver room, and I was a part of that, and we kind of used that same mold for this team. Because Lions need receivers, right? I mean, the Lions need a lot of depth at receiver position. But he said we did it with the Rams. We were able to kind of flip that position, and a year later, it wasn't a need anymore. We had a lot of talent there. I think receiver can be flipped very fast. Just from an outside perspective, again, I'm not inside, but just how I look at it, I think receiver can be flipped quickly because there's just a lot of depth. I mean, think about it, right? How many college football teams are there? And then you think 4 or 5 receivers. I mean, for most of those teams, 2 receivers are in contention for being drafted. I mean, there's so many receiver prospects in the draft that even UDFAs have a legit shot. I mean, think about it, right? And then obviously you have free agency, and there's so many free agent receivers that there's guys that have some talent that get pushed down in price and they're cheaper. And it's like, okay, there's a lot of options at receivers. So I think that can definitely flip quickly. I'm actually not too worried about the wide receiver position at all because I believe it's going to be flipped. I believe receiver will be, boom, we're going to figure it out quickly. I think, a couple moves here and boom, 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 you got the receiver position and you're good to go. Plus, I'm excited to see Cephas's upside and continue to work with him, maybe tracking the ball downfield. But we saw, his ability to get some separation last season and what kind of he was known for coming out of the draft. I'd say the 40-yard dash is good because, it's not 100% accurate because think about it. I mean, a 40-yard dash, I never get too caught up in a 40-yard dash because I look at like Brad Holmes does. The guy's not wearing pads. He's running in a straight line. There's no one out there. This is not football. You're literally running straight. This is not football, right? He's not even wearing pads. They're not even doing it in pads. So it's completely different. But he did say, well, what it can do is confirm results. If you think a guy's fast on film and he runs a fast 40, then they're like, okay, I see what I'm saying. But if he runs a slow 40, now you could come back and be like, all right, hold up, let me go look and see why that came out so slow. So he's like, you should use the data to really confirm things just to see, okay, wait, what am I seeing things wrong? But he said, and this was interesting, I didn't think he'd say this, but he says he uses the data basically to back check his eye test. So if he doesn't want to just fall in love with the eye test and say, okay, well, the data says something different. It's figure out why the data says something different. Why do the numbers show slower than what I'm seeing on film? That's important. And I didn't think he would say that. I mean, a lot of people look the other way. Hey, 40's cool, but it's all about what my eye test tells me. But for him, he's saying it's a little bit different. Okay, the speed, he looks good on field, but if there's some reason analytically that he keeps showing up that he's not that fast, there's something behind that, and I need to figure out what that is. So we know they're data guys. They are, those type of people that love to hear the science behind all the numbers. So, okay, I like it, Brad Holmes. And then he also said that he thinks players will be looking for shorter deals this offseason in free agency because, they want more later, but he's not sure. That's an interesting thought. I actually was thinking that, that could make sense. I could see where they're coming from because, it's the low salary cap, so they could be looking for shorter. But that actually could maybe make them look for longer deals. The reason I push that is because possibly players are saying, okay, even players that aren't expecting to get these longer deals, now's the time to do it. Because now you can negotiate, hey, you know what? You guys don't have a lot of money this offseason. I'll take a longer deal. You guys can backload it. That could be the case. Shorter deals, meaning pay more now, could be a little more difficult for teams unless it's like a 2-year deal and you're putting it on next season. So I was thinking the other way, but that is what he said. And he also said he would not punish players for opting out this season because, we saw in the NFL as well. But in draft, he said, look, that's not something that we're looking at saying, well, he opted out, so, we're not going to draft him. There's a lot of talented guys that have opted out. There's a lot of talented guys. I mean, there's so many players that opted out this past season in college football, including a guy, in the top 10, like Micah Parsons, right? It's throughout the draft, there's tons of guys who opted out. So we're not going to punish them for opting out. It's really not something that's deterred us away from drafting a player or looking at a player in the draft. Campbell did seem to have a slightly different answer on that question early when he was talking first, saying that, the opt-outs are a factor because there's certain players that you say, wow, they look good, but they only played 5 games. So you kind of have to, trust, where you're going with.
There is a little bit of a leap of faith, and you're having to, some of these guys, you got to go off old film or then these guys, man, it looked pretty good, but they only played 5 games or 4 games. And so it is a little bit tricky, but listen, those are the hands. That's the hand we're dealt.
A lot of, trusting and kind of just going all for it and trusting that it's going to work out, even though there's not maybe as much film as you would like and you don't know how they're looking last season. So he brought it up as more of a factor. Brad Holmes kind of played it off as like, it's not that big of a deal. Bringing up Kenny Golladay. He said that he believes Kenny Golladay can be a number 1 receiver. Like we've all seen it. Yes, Kenny can be a number 1 in the league. He wouldn't say what they were going to do, but he said you would hear shortly. So we'll hear shortly. Okay. And that someone like that is intriguing because it's someone that the defense has to focus on, throughout the week.
Guys are intriguing, man. When you have guys on your roster that the defense is like spending extra time on all week, that's who they're worried about. I mean, those guys that's kind of the type of guys you're looking for.
So that is an intriguing piece. So that's, I feel like Kenny Golladay is going to be brought back one way or another, whether that's an extension or even to tag. I think it's more realistic it's an extension. I think Golladay is going to be brought back. What is that going to be? Does that mean tag? If it's going to be a tag, Lions are going to have to clear space so they can actually tag him. They're planning to use the tag. We could get that news that Lions plan to use the tag, something, even though they can't do it right now because, they got to get the money to do it. But we'll hear shortly. So if we're going to hear these about Justin Coleman and Desmond Trufant soon, and we're going to hear about, Golladay shortly, then I think, pay attention because very soon we could start hearing about cuts. And then we could start hearing about potentially guys being brought back. They didn't really talk as much about Romeo with the franchise tag. They did bring it up, but it was more specific on to Kenny Golladay because that's everybody's kind of wondering. So we'll see what they do this offseason. But I am anticipating Desmond Trufant to be cut this week probably. Justin Coleman, we'll see. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he's cut as well, especially if they put a June 1st designation on him, a post June 1st to save a little bit more for this season. And then the Kenny Golladay news, man, it's going to be the biggest. Let me know below. Do you guys think Golladay will be back as a Lion? Not what do you want. What do you think will happen? Asked if they were trying to do a contract extension with him, and he said we're not going to go into that for the sake of the process. I do have a feeling, though, Golladay will be brought back somehow, some way or another. Again, not saying that's what I would do. I just have a feeling that's going to be the case. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and I'm out.